Welcome into Flag for Discussion, episode 34 for Monday, October 13th. My name is Farbod Merkazi. He is Jay's Hatfield, and boy, do we have some things to clean up on our end. I mean, yesterday was nuts. Yesterday, number 3 lost, number 6 lost, number 14 lost, 15 lost, 17 lost, 22 lost, and number 25 lost. The AP poll is not going to look normal tomorrow, but you know what? We don't like the AP poll anyways. We had a whole spiel about that last week. Jace, I heard through the grapevine you were trying to call in sick for today's show, so we didn't have to respond.
Yeah, it was a rough. Tigers on Friday night was tough. The Ducks yesterday, it's been a rough sports week. I need the Lions tonight to get me right.
Yeah. Hopefully the Lions win something for you so you can come out of this weekend semi-happy. You could go 1 for 3. Hey,
if no one's got me, Jared Goff got me,
Same fantasy team. Hey, 1 for 3 is a Hall of Fame baseball player. So if you go 1 for 3 this weekend, you should feel pretty happy. Hang your head, just sit up tight. Feel pretty good about yourself. Well, there's a lot of places to start. Before we do, make sure you're following us on YouTube at Flag for Discussion, TikTok at Flag4 Discussion, on Twitter at F4 Discussion, wherever you get your podcast at Flag for Discussion. We have some things to clean up. Like I said, we have to talk about the Oregon-Indiana game. We have to talk about Texas-Oklahoma. We have Trent Bray at Oregon State just got fired. USC controlled the Michigan game. There's a lot of games to get to, and we'll try to break it all down in a reasonable amount of time for you all today. I think, Jace, why don't we just skip the first game? But let's just talk North Texas, South Florida. That was a great game.
Was it 63-36? Good, fun little Friday night fireworks.
Yeah, that was a South Florida was down 21-7, came back, just destroyed in the second half. That was a game we should talk about, I think. But in all reality, we could actually, you know what? Let's talk about how I got my suit. I got my
Some good news.
It's good news. Okay, never mind. Everyone at home is probably pissed now. I'm trying to avoid the elephant in the room, but let's get to it. Number 7, Indiana went to Eugene, takes down number 3, Oregon, 30-20. This is the first one of these pods we've had to do, Jace.
Yeah, it's the first regular season Ducks loss in 2 years. It's not a feeling we're used to, but one that is inevitable in today's world of college football. Got punched in the face, punched in the mouth, out-coached, outplayed, out-hustled. Indiana, they looked better. They looked ready. They executed better. They looked like they wanted it more. And I'll give the shout-out to Aiden Fisher. That's the best college linebacker I've ever watched in a game. Unbelievable. He's every tackle. Somehow, some way, Aiden Fisher's in the middle of it. He's an absolute beast. I'd love to see him in Honolulu Blue in a year or two whenever his NFL draft eligibility goes up. He was a dog. I got to shout him out, too. He was the best player on that football field by a long shot.
How do you get Honolulu Blue to Detroit, Michigan?
I don't know, but I like that that's our blue color, but it's not quite, it doesn't strike me as the color of that city, but it works.
No, whatever. There's a lot of things to echo what you said. The story of the game for me was, there's a number of stories of the game. I was disappointed in Oregon's offensive game plan, but I don't think we need to talk about that. Let's talk about Oregon shortly. Indiana came in ready to play. Mm-hmm. Indiana had not just a game plan schematically, but we talked about it before the pod. Last week, we mentioned on the show, too, Nick Roadcap, Indiana's beat reporter, tweeted out a bunch of the difference in sizes between the Indiana defensive line and the Oregon offensive line, basically saying that Oregon should be able to push them around. And then on Friday night, I think the Indiana defensive line coach, he was one of their defensive coaches, he tweeted out, all I've heard all week is how small we are compared to them. Guess we'll find out tomorrow. So bottom line, Oregon didn't mean to, but an Indiana beat reporter provided bulletin board material for the Indiana team, and they came out with their hair on fire. They came out ready to play. They came out ready to go. Like you said, Aiden Fisher was in on every tackle. The Indiana defensive game plan was as good as you can get. A lot of criticism will be headed Dante Moore's way, and rightfully so. Or a lot of criticism will be headed the Oregon offensive line's way. But Indiana came in with a very complex blitz package plan for the game, and Oregon wasn't able to pick it up as easily as they probably thought they would. The offensive line, I mean, I guess maybe we should have expected how it was going to go based off of the first snap of the game when Dante Moore gets sacked. But the offensive line, seemingly for Oregon, didn't play very well. But it was Indiana disguising everything so well, and they were in on everything. And then offensively, they weren't moving the ball as well as they probably wanted to, but the Oregon defense came ready to play. They just made more plays than Oregon. That's what we said last week on the preview shows. Which team is gonna convert red zone possessions into touchdowns? Which team's gonna convert red zone possessions into field goals? And Indiana took advantage when they needed to.
Yeah, Indiana had 3 possessions to get to the red zone. All 3 resulted in touchdowns. And then, making 50, like special teams, making a 58-yarder twice, before and after the timeout. They did those things correctly. They were better on third down. Still not great, but they were better than Oregon on third downs. They finished drives better than Oregon did. They made the big plays when they needed to. And that's what good teams do. And that's what it takes, when you play against a good team. That's what you have to do to win. Indiana did that. I also thought defensively too, they did a really good job of taking away Oregon loves to kind of like chew yards on quick screens, quick hitters like that, dump offs to running backs, or just like quick little like outside runs, just trying to eat 4 or 5 yards, maybe break a tackle and turn that into 10 plus. Other than like one early screen pass to Gary Bryant that went for a first down on one of the first couple drives of the game. Oregon, every time they tried one of their quick hitters, Indiana adjusted incredibly
Snuffed
well.
the guy right away.
Yep, and those quick hitters turned into 4 or 5 yard losses, and Oregon kept getting themselves behind the sticks early, and then just didn't have what it takes between Indiana's game planning and Dante Moore, unable to get the ball downfield and make up for that. And I thought Indiana, not only did they come in with a really good game plan, I thought they adjusted on the fly incredibly well. Something, as an Oregon fan, I was so jealous watching a team actually adjust their game plan as the game went on to make themselves better in the moment. Oregon didn't do a lick of that. Indiana was doing it all game, and it showed. Like Dante looked like he never knew where a blitz was coming. Every time he looked left, the blitz was to the right. Every time he looked right, the blitz was to the left. Every time he rolled out, the blitz was coming from that same direction. It felt like they were in Oregon's headsets. Like that's how how perfect that scheme was created. It just Dante was put in a blender, and he just couldn't get out of it. And Indiana kept the pressure up. Once they saw Dante was not right, I think once he lost his confidence, I think he was just kind of shot in that game. And I think once Indiana sniffed that out, they just started sending pressure. They started just playing tight, and that was when Dante at the end of the game really lost his step there. So all the credit to Indiana's defense. The scheme was perfect. The adjustments were perfect. The execution and the energy that they played with was perfect. That is one of the most well-rounded defensive performances I've seen in college football. It was damn near perfect. I know Oregon scored 20 points. 7 of those were on a pick six. So they held Oregon to 13. And one of them was a blown, kind of a deep touchdown pass where it was a blown coverage. So even besides that play, you held Oregon to 2 field goals, which is pretty unbelievable to do. But I think the Indiana defense was definitely the brightest spot of any part of this game for anyone.
Right. And if you want to shift to the offense, Elijah Surratt, Roman Hemby, and Fernando Mendoza, they held their own. Fernando, the bad throws he made or the sacks he took, or like the negative plays that he took, they weren't on him. It was just a really good Oregon defense that was pressuring him here and there. You probably wish that he didn't throw that pass at the fourth quarter that resulted in the pick six. But overall, I think, like you said, every time it felt like Indiana had the ball, they were falling forward. Even if it was a 2-yard loss, somehow the guy would fall forward to get back to the line of scrimmage. That's not like a coping mechanism either. That was more like these guys are damn good, and they're with the
more.
plot.
That's what you do when you want it. You fall forward, right? You fight.
Yeah, like they're with the plot in general. Like there was a couple of plays that Rowan Hemby, I thought he was stuffed, and all of a sudden he somehow gained 3 yards out of it. And overall, you got to commend everybody involved at Indiana, from like their offensive staffers, the defensive staffers who felt slighted by everyone talking about how small they are and how Oregon should just steamroll them. Good on Indiana for coming in like with a message to send, and they sent the message. Kurt Signetti, by the way, we talked about out coaching, and we normally don't say Dan Lanning or his staff was out coached very often, but you could even tell in that fourth quarter, even despite the pick six, there was a game plan of we have the lead right now or we're tied. They scored, they made it 27-20 with 6 minutes left. And then it basically was, all right, Oregon's going to go down there. They have a chance to score. If they score, it's going to be probably 2-3 minutes left, in just enough time for Indiana to bleed some clock, get downfield, kick a field goal for the win. The game script that Kurt Signetti had was top notch, outcoached Dan Lanning throughout the game. For me, shifting to Oregon now, what frustrated me more than anything wasn't the loss. You lose to a top 10 team, an Indiana team that's probably going to go maybe undefeated for the rest of the season. They don't have a very hard schedule. The hardest one I think we saw was Penn State. Do they have Ohio State on the schedule? I don't believe so. But
no.
Regardless,
they're going to be 12-0.
They should be 12-0. And they're damn good. And I'm not upset or frustrated at the loss. It was more Oregon's offense came into that game. It felt like when you have a good offensive coach and like in Will Stein, when you have the offensive playmakers that Oregon has and you're coming off a bye, you're expecting not necessarily deep shot, but like a fun offensive game plan. And it felt like when Oregon came into that game, it was let's feel Indiana out instead. And then, like you said, Indiana's blitz packages, their defense eventually started getting to the Oregon offensive line and Dante so much that Dante became a one read and chuck it quarterback. If the one read wasn't open, he was rolling out. He took a good amount of self sacks by running out of bounds instead of just throwing the ball away. There were multiple possessions. Not as many as we thought during the game. After film review, I credit Jeff Schwartz for this, former Oregon offensive lineman, because he's gone through the film. He's tweeted out a bunch of his findings. He's like, there weren't a ton of open receivers, but there were clearly plays to be made. The Dante, because they weren't his first read, and he was a little rattled by his offensive line performance and his protection, that he just wasn't finding. And credit once again goes to Indiana for doing that, for forcing Dante into that position. That's the first time we've seen realistically an Oregon quarterback under the Dan Lanning era feel that way since the Georgia game in his first game. Even in the Washington losses with Dan Lanning, the quarterback Bo Nix balled out. It was the Washington defense played really well. This time, that was the first time I've seen an Oregon quarterback under Dan Lanning clearly rattled. And I'm sure Dante's going to come back and recover pretty well. But if we're just talking about the game itself, Oregon had 9 fewer first downs than Indiana. Oregon had 2 less third down conversions. They went 3 for 14. Indiana went 5 for 14. Oregon converted 3 for 4 on fourth downs, which was great. They needed that. They had about 80 less total yards than Indiana. They had less than 200 passing yards. They had less than 100 rushing yards. They averaged 2.7 yards per rush. Indiana only averaged 3.9. It's pretty solid, but that goes to show like Oregon's defense came to play. And they gave up 30, sure, but Oregon's defense came to play. Oregon's offense, it was just a frustrating part of, I mean, you're at home and you have 7 penalties. There's just some, without sounding like such a homer, I was just frustrated at, you're coming off a bye, and same things we said about Penn State for that Oregon game when they were coming off a bye. Coming off a bye, you have a good offensive coach and good offensive playmakers. I expected a more aggressive, let's go get it game plan. And it was more they were trying to feel it out. That was my frustration.
Yeah, I think that was exactly the issue for Oregon. The Oregon coaching staff was outcoached twice. Once by Indiana and once by themselves. It came into the game without the offense came into the game without a winning game plan. They clearly didn't have an idea or a goal or a strategy or a matchup. They had nothing set up for this game. It felt like they were going to try to feel it out at first, which is not a good sign out of a bye week in a big matchup. And so not only did they come into the game without a good game plan, without a winning game plan, they failed to adjust into any sort of winning formula. Oregon had a lot of success. Jordan Davison averaged 7.5 yards a carry, and he was pretty much running clearly only between the tackles. But Oregon never gave him more than one. They never gave him consecutive carries, and they never let him stay in for a drive where they just kept feeding him. Noah Whittington, also kind of a between the tacklers runner. He averaged 5.5 yards a carry. Jaden Lamar, kind of a between the tackles runner. He averaged 5.7 yards a carry. They had success. They had opportunities in front of them and a game plan and a strategy in front of them that was working. They just never adjusted to it. They never like let that become what was going to be the offense. It's like they would run it once, like, okay, we're good with the run. Now we can just force Dante to throw, when that was just not working. I thought, like I said, they were outcoached in game plan, and then they also outcoached themselves by just failing to adjust what was working. And that combination was enough to, I think you could see just the body, the body language of the Oregon players. Nobody looked confident, nobody looked energetic, nobody looked like they wanted it. And that's just that blood. And then I think, it just kind of bleeds into poor execution, and then poor execution leads to obviously negative plays, and you go downhill from there. So I thought that was really disappointing. And I think Oregon had, unfortunately, your offensive leader, Dante Moore, had one of his worst game for sure as a Duck. Just a terrible game. And then your defensive leader, what you think would be your leader, Mateo, he also had we've talked about it with Mateo before.
Kind of disappears.
He'll just have these games where he just is a nobody. He's like absolutely useless. This was one of them. No sacks, no QB pressures, no QB hits, 0 tackles, 1 assist of a tackle, no tackles for losses as well. He disappeared. I was watching him on probably 30 or 40 snaps, and there was a few times where I seriously was like, is this guy injured or is he sick? Like, he doesn't even look like he's trying right now. I would be very curious to hear what comes out of that. But he had one of his infamous classic. He's good for like 3 or 4 of these a year where he just disappears and is utterly useless. Like, I'd rather just play 10 guys and not have that negative energy on the field. And he had one of those games, unfortunately, which is just really disappointing to see. That also, like, you had Dante Moore and Mateo as potential first-round draft picks. I think both of them played themselves out of that conversation in this game. And then you have Will Stein, who is a big name for head coaching jobs around the country. He might have coached his way out of that, or at least some of the bigger programs that were eyeing him might have tampered the expectations on him a little bit. And that could be good long-term for the Ducks in terms of good people sticking around. But for them individually, you just played yourself out of a lot of money for a few of those guys.
Oregon Homer and me, I'm going to blame my buddy Scott. He's a Jets fan, and he's been on the lose more for more bandwagon because he really wants Dante Moore being the Jets quarterback next year. So I'm gonna blame Scott for that one. Real quick, the Oregon defense, Mateo was non-existent. You're right. Amari Washington overall fine. Barrett Alexander, you got to commend. He played really well. Dylan Thieneman was everywhere. I feel like he was in on every big tackle that was like could have broken free for a touchdown. It was him or Bryce Betcher stopping the guy. They had their warts. There were a couple plays where, like, even with how good the Oregon secondary is projected to be, like, Elijah Surratt had his way, and you gotta commend him for that. But you're looking at the Indiana defense. Indiana finished with 6 sacks. Aiden Fisher and Kellen White each had a sack and a half each. Then Isaiah Jones, Elijah Hardy, they each had a sack. Mario Landino had a sack. They had 8 tackles for loss, 2 pass deflections. Oregon had 6 pass deflections, so great for them. 4 tackles for loss and a sack. Overall, I thought my feeling was the reason Oregon lost that game was the offensive game plan. It wasn't the defense. Sure, the defense had some drives where it was like, oh wow, they just gave up a 6-minute 78-yard drive. Like, it happened 2 or 3 times in that game that, like you said, it resulted in 21 points. They converted touchdowns on each of them. But overall, the Oregon defense made it hard on Fernando Mendoza and Elijah Surratt and the Indiana offense. For me, this is a theme that we had in a lot of big games for Oregon in the past. It was like, thank God the offense was able to score because the defense, quote unquote, couldn't stop anybody, right? And maybe if Oregon had 37, we would have been more down on the defense right now. because the offense technically did their job and you were just hoping the defense would get one or two more stops. But this is a top 10 team. Indiana's a really damn good team. And Curt Cignetti in 2 years is what, excuse me, like 16-2 now at Indiana, where Indiana for the 20 or 30 years before this game, they averaged like 4.8 wins in a season. They just got their sixth win. They're 6-0. This is a really good team. I don't think you can like hang your head on losing to a top 10 team or to a really good team, but you got to hang your head on the offense didn't come ready to play. The broadcast knows that Kenny and Sadiq and Decory Moore were hardly utilized in the first half. Like Decory Moore ended with 4 catches, Kenny and Sadiq ended with 2. Those are your two best playmakers. If you're not going to run the ball, get the ball into your playmakers' hands. And that I was also disappointed. As good as Jeremiah McClellan is, as good as Malik Benson, who had the 44-yard passing touchdown from Dante is, as good as Gary Bryant is, your best playmakers are Decory Moore and Kenyon Sadiq. And maybe Indiana did a really good job taking those guys away. But if it just felt like you're underutilizing the talent that you have. And that's the disappointment I had is Oregon had 13 offensive points. And I don't remember even a time with Mario Cristobal at head coach where I felt the offense was the reason Oregon lost.
Yeah, it's not something we've felt as a lifelong Oregon fan. It's not really a feeling I've had ever. It's kind of the first time I've ever been mad at the offense in a loss. So usually it's always the defense. Special teams also didn't come up to play for them as well, but that is, I guess it's field goal unit more so. But that's a whole other story. You and I could sit here and hash out thoughts for hours, about that game and about what that means for Oregon. So with that said, I'll finish. This is my final thought in the game here. It's more moving forward. If you're Indiana, that's the huge win. I think you need to like kind of break that spell of like people saying, "Oh, your program, you can't win this, you can't win that." You're not on that next level. You are on that next level, and you are there. You can win. You have a very favorable schedule. You'll be favored the rest of the season. Win out, and you're playing for a Big Ten championship, and whether it's a good thing or not, you're playing for a first round bye in the playoff. And if you're Oregon, it's not over. You still have a very favorable schedule. You have some tough teams. You have USC in there who looked really good. You have Washington who looks really good, but it's a very winnable schedule. You can still go 11-1. Whether or not that's a Big Ten championship for you to be determined, you might need a little bit of help, but that's still a playoff, right? That's still very much hopes for the playoff. As frustrating when you see a loss as it can be to get down and take every negative and think, oh, that's going to last forever. We're never going to be good again. Look at Ohio State last year. Sometimes you need to get punched in the mouth. Sometimes you need, like Ohio State was a team last year where, yes, they had Will Howard, but a lot of good players on that team were young. You had Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, Caleb Downs. A lot of their star players were young. And sometimes it takes a loss like this for those young guys to learn how to take a step up, what it feels like to get punched in the mouth. Like, what did we do wrong in preparation that led to this? Sometimes it takes a game like this to learn that. And Oregon is one of the youngest teams in the country. They're led by almost entirely freshmen and sophomore or redshirt versions of those, basically guys that have been in the program 3 or less years. You've got a lot of time to figure it out for the rest of the season. You're a very young team. You're a very talented team. I have faith that they will get back on track, and I think that's what they'll do. It sucks in the short term, but sometimes it's not what's worst in the long term.
Exactly. I completely agree. When you're looking at from Oregon perspective, your entire secondary, other than Dylan Thieneman and Jaden Kennedy, are freshmen or redshirt freshmen. Your best receivers are freshmen, true freshmen, or redshirt freshmen. Your best running backs are true freshmen. Your quarterback's a redshirt sophomore. Your defensive line is full of redshirt sophomores. So this is a very good learning moment for the Oregon team of, hey, you can get punched in the mouth too. I think the Rose Bowl loss was another game where you were like, oh, the Oregon didn't come ready to play in that game. But at least this one is a learning moment for a bunch of freshmen and sophomores who are going to be together for the next couple of years. And I also think this is a huge learning moment for the coaching staffs too, because whether we like it, we like to say or not, the coaching staffs. I texted you this yesterday. I know Dan Lanning's a entertainer and he's really good at it, and he's probably going to be the next a guy on next coach on College Game Day whenever he decides to retire and Nick Saban decides to retire from TV. I understand all of that. What I also believe is he's smart enough to know he shouldn't be taking his shirt off on national TV if he's not fully confident in his team. I think this game was a shell shock game for Oregon's coaching staff. I think they had a lot of things taken away from them. That's why the offensive game plan looks as paltry as it does to us, because I think they thought they could do a lot more things than Indiana allowed them to do in game. And Oregon's coaching staff is taking a big look in the mirror today, looking at the film, saying, maybe we need to adjust how we head into these games or head into bye weeks or coming out of bye weeks or game plan for what our players can do. So it's as much as it is like the Oregon players need to play better. There was more also, I think the coaching staff is like here's a reminder. We're not just going to run through the Big Ten. On the Indiana side, you're going to probably go undefeated, or at least you should now. We said before the game, like you said, this is your level decider. If you're going to beat Oregon or lose close to Oregon, yeah, you're on the elite level. If you're going to get blown out by Oregon, then you're just a very good team. You're not going to be the best teams. And they went into hostile territory on the road to Oregon and controlled the game. So good for Indiana. All credit, hats off to Coach Signetti and his staff. Hats off to Fernando Mendoza, Roman Hemby, Elijah Surratt, and the defense too. Like, Indiana won that game. Oregon lost the game from their offensive game planning, but Indiana took the game, and they looked like they wanted more, and they were aggressive. Mm-hmm. On that note, that was a pick I got wrong. You got it right against the spread. We had our biggest picks show last week, and it almost ended up in a wash, to be honest.
Yeah, it didn't even end up mattering much.
Do you want to go over our records and go over our shots and bark, all the picks?
Yep, let's head into it. So heading into this past week, I was 19-16 heading into it. Farbode was 23-12. We picked 10 games. I'll run through them now. First game we picked was Indiana at Oregon. Oregon 7.5-point favorites. Farbode was on the Ducks. I was on the Hoosiers. Indiana won and covered, so 1 point for me there. Oklahoma and Texas, we were both on Texas. Texas was -1.5. They ended up winning pretty handedly. What was it, like 20? What was the final score end up being of that game? 20 to
23-6.
23-6. The third game was Michigan at USC. USC was 2.5-point favorites. I was on USC. Farbode was on Michigan. This is where it starts to take a turn for me. I started 3-0. Farbode, you were 1-2 to start. But then Georgia, Auburn. I was on Auburn. Auburn, I've been wrong every time I've picked them. I should just probably stop. Georgia was 3.5-point favorites. They won by 10. I was also very frustrating. We'll get more into that game, how it ended, but a very controversial call at the goal line there that really changed that game around. Then you had South Carolina at LSU. LSU 9.5-point favorites. South Carolina, they lost by 10. Very unfortunate to be on the wrong side of that for both of us. We were both on the Cox there, and they didn't get it done. Sixth game, ASU at Utah. We were both on Utah. I was originally on ASU if you were listening to the preview show, but then it got announced Sam Leavitt was injured, and then the line changed to 9.5, I believe, right before kickoff. It was originally 5.5. So Farbode and I had talked. I had switched to Utah, joining there with him, and Utah looked really good and dominant in that game for those that stayed up late and watched it. Then we had number 7, Alabama. Sorry, 7th game, number 8, Alabama at Missouri. Alabama's 3-point favorites. They won by 3. Classic Vegas, always knowing how to get that right. So we're just going to call that a tie, a push for both of us. We were both on Bama there. All right, the 8th game was Florida at Texas A&M. Texas A&M, 7.5-point favorites. They covered. Florida. Farbode, you were on Texas A&M. I was on Florida. Texas A&M continues to get it done. They have a lot of playmakers outside. They're kind of the SEC Indiana in terms of like really good quarterback, 2 really good wide receivers, and then just solid players elsewhere. But they looked good. They looked very good, especially against a really good Florida defense that had been playing really well. Texas A&M, solid outing for them there. 9th game was TCU at Kansas State. I'm very disappointed in my Horned Frogs. That might have taken them out of the Big 12 race. We were both on the Horned Frogs. TCU was a 1.5-point favorite. They lost pretty handedly in what was a slow to start but very high scoring game to finish. And then the last game we picked was Ohio State at Illinois. Ohio State came into that game 14.5-point favorites. Barbeau said, give me the Buckeyes, and he was proven correct. I was riding with my fellow Illini here in Chicago, and unfortunately, they couldn't pull that out for me. So Barbeau went 5-4 on the week. He is now 28-16-1. You're still killing it. You're still red hot. 12 games over 500 is very impressive against the spread. I went 4-5 on the week, so 1 game difference between the two of us. I am now 23-21-1. So you've got a 5-game lead on me. I need to get hot next week and go 5-0. I'm just going to fade you next week and pray that it works out. So I'll let you put your picks in first, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, no, next we should do that. We should do whoever's leading or whoever had the better week the week prior makes their picks first.
It's it's like the golf thing, right? Whoever had the better score to go first. We'll have to do that.
All right, style. Going into our week 8 preview, I'll pick first every time and give you the opportunity, even though we make our picks most of the time before the show. But shots in the bark, both of ours missed. Jace still holding a 5-4 shot in the bark lead, and then the FFD parlay, we're 1 for 7. We're still positive on the year. I'm just disappointed in NC State because we went 3 for 4 on legs this week. We were NC State covering the 24.5 against Notre Dame away from that parlay hitting. But you know what? That's why they make a week 8. So we'll come back. We'll get the 4th leg for this week. I want to go into, Jace, a game that you and I think rightfully predicted is going to be an ugly game.
Yeah.
And a game you and I were both right on the money in terms of our picks for the game, because Texas beat number 6 Oklahoma 23-6. We both were talking about, all right, Arch Manning has his faults. But a lot of it is on the Texas offensive line. Texas offensive line, they didn't attack recruiting through the portal, so their O-line is a lot of in-house guys that they brought in through high school. They're trying to develop, and for better for worse, that is a good game plan for your offensive line. But they were just a lot higher on them than how they've played, and they've struggled all year. They haven't given Arch a chance. But going into this game, we were concerned about how they would fare against Oklahoma's Brent Venables' defense, against the Oklahoma defensive line that had 10 sacks on Jackson Arnold. And we both said this was going to be ugly. And then, not long story short, John Mateer was projected to try to play in this game, and he did play in the game. But you and I were both like, all right, if he plays, he's not going to be 100%. I'm not a doctor, but I'm not going to be the one to say John's going to come in and just light the world on fire. Texas defense is really good. Mateer ended up getting hurt again in the same hand in the middle of the game. He toughed it out, stayed in the game. You just could tell that something was still bothering him. Like, he wasn't terrible. Like, the 3 picks we'll get to. But even like when he completed passes, the passes weren't right on the money. The balls were floating a little bit. That was a concern we had on the Oklahoma side. Is like, how effective are they going to be offensively against a really good Texas defense that's coming into that game after getting pushed around? They're pissed off after the Florida loss. You and I both picked Texas going to the game. I thought it would be a little bit uglier and a little bit closer. I thought Oklahoma would be able to do something offensively. But do you have any major takeaways?
Yeah. So it's kind of to finish the point you were talking about with John Mateer being hurt and playing. He took 5 sacks in that game. That if this is like a lesser opponent, or maybe it's like it's your rival, it's Texas, but Texas didn't have a good defense this year. Sure, you can play an injured John Mateer, but when you play a Texas defense that's as good as it's been this year, I know the team hasn't been great, but the defense has. You put up a lot of risk, and yeah, the 5 sacks every time he gets hit, I'm sure everyone on the sideline is like, "Oh no." I don't know, interesting coaching decisions to play him. I don't know if an injured John Mateer gave you any. It's easy to say hindsight, but I even said this before the game. I don't know if an injured John Mateer really gives you that much better of a chance than
Mikey Hawkins.
Going to Mikey Hawkins. And I mean, obviously it's hindsight, so it's easy to say, oh, clearly that didn't happen. But I don't know. I thought that was a question when we were going into the game. Something for Texas that I thought was big. Quintavion Wisner had 22 carries for 94 yards, averaging 4.3 yards a carry. Nothing incredibly eye-popping with 4.3 yards a carry, and he had one almost 40-yard carry. So if you take that out, he's averaging like less than 3 yards a carry. But the important thing is they did it. They stuck to it. They forced him to be on the ground, and they let someone not named Arch Manning be the leading rusher. And it was enough to actually free up Arch Manning. He was 21 of 27. It was the most accurate he had been this year. He didn't turn the ball over. I think that was steps in the right direction. The run game, sure, it wasn't beautiful and sexy and clicking the way you would love it to, but they did it enough that it forced the defense to actually focus and stop the run. And it gave Arch Manning a fair shot to throw a pass. I think it gave him a fair shot to stand in a comfortable pocket and actually step into it and make a throw versus feeling like he has to roll out or scramble every play. So I thought that that was a big point that I really liked about Arch Manning. I thought that was a huge, like, just development upgrade as an offense to help get Arch moving a little bit. And I thought Arch looked better. He wasn't fantastic or, he wasn't amazing, but he was good and he was good enough.
He did the job.
Yeah, he did the job.
He didn't put the balls in harm's way. And one thing you got to commend Sark for is we said it about both teams going into the game. Neither team has a run game. Neither team has been able to run the ball. They've relied on their quarterback making superhero plays if they were to be successful. Arch Manning hadn't made those superhero plays. John Mateer had. That's why before the injury, John Mateer was a major Heisman favorite going into, and then he got hurt, and then he had this bad game. But they had Arch take some easy out route completions, 3-4 yards here and there. That really set up the run game down the middle. The offensive line for Texas struggled big time in the first quarter, and Oklahoma had a 6-3 lead going into the second half. You almost felt like, oh man, this game's going to end 9-3, 9-6, because neither offense can get it going. Someone's going to get downfield and off a turnover, and it's just not going to work. But Texas stuck with it. They, like you said, the important part is they kept doing it, and their running game eventually, even though it wasn't crazy, they opened up holes. They protected Arch. Like, that's one of the other things that, like, we talked about Oregon, is if you commit to a run game, it protects your quarterback.
Yeah.
It forces the defense to sag off a little bit so they can also be prepared to defend the run. One of the things we said last week was when Florida realized Texas wasn't going to be able to run the ball, you know what they were able to do? Rear their hair back and be like, we're rushing the passer.
Yeah.
That was what they were able to do. Just kept doing for Oklahoma. It was the same thing. And I got to give a lot of credit to Texas's defense. They did a really good job bottling Mateer up. But Mateer's injury wasn't in his legs. It was in his hand. So one thing you expected almost with John Mateer was this guy's going to use his legs, try to gain the yardage that he might not feel comfortable throwing, and trying to gain a couple yards here, a couple yards there, especially because Oklahoma also has the same warts running in the running game. They also can't run the ball. So Texas did a really good job bottling Mateer up, keeping him within the pocket, which ended up, like you said, leading to 5 sacks and some issues there. Overall, Texas went 10 of 17 on third down. They averaged more yards per pass. They averaged much more yards per rush. Oklahoma had 1.6 yards per rush. They have 3 turnovers in the second half. John Mateer shouldn't be throwing those picks if you want a chance to win, sure. But also, how much of it is him forcing those to try to make a play because the run game is averaging less than 2 yards per carry? At some point, like, Arch, is going to have one of those plays every game that's like a 30-yard, 40-yard touchdown pass that just looks absolutely gorgeous. And one of the reasons that people are still super high on Arch is, like, he still has those moments. Mm-hmm. So he had the touchdown pass in the second half to DeAndre Moore Jr. Then Ryan Niblett had a 75-yard punt return touchdown. Texas started out 0-3 on third down. They finished 9 for their next 12. Like, eventually Texas figured it out. A lot of that was because they committed to establishing a semblance of a run game, and Oklahoma still could not, and it just forced Mateer to try to make plays, try to play Superman, and it didn't work.
Yeah.
That in the end of it, I had a buy or sell for you last week. That was one of Texas or Penn State will end up in the top 10 by the end of the year. Now, both Oklahoma and Texas are sitting 1-1 in the SEC. Both Oklahoma's 5-1, Texas is 4-2 overall. I just wonder, like, obviously Penn State's not going to. They just lost again to Northwestern. But if this is something that Texas can hold on to, how far can they take it? We didn't eliminate them for the playoff last week.
No. I think it mostly depends on the schedule with them. It's winnable, but it's not going to be easy. You do play at Georgia and you do play Texas A&M. But I thought this was a much better Texas team. The run game, just trying to establish it and actually putting something out there helps you a lot currently and in the future. I still think the run game wasn't great, and I like it. I think it's going to have to be a little bit better to make the playoff because now you have to be perfect. So I do think you're going to need a little bit more out
100%.
of it. But it does make you. I think it takes you from being a are we going to go 6-6 kind of year to okay, we can get to 10-2, maybe 9-3 would be nice, just to at least throw some sort of hey Arch, go into the offseason with Arch looked better the rest of the half of the year. The offense looks like it started to figure it out. Going with a high note. Oklahoma, the one issue that they might have moving forward, I think we were really high on them. A lot of people are high on them. The one issue that we didn't mention enough, and I think just like us, the rest of the nation kind of forgot about with an Arbuckle offense. Their issue they had at Washington State, and the reason why they never took the leap to being better than good, was they don't run the ball much, and they don't really try to establish the run. And you saw that issue with Texas, because once Colin Simmons just completely stopped caring about a potential run play, and he just started rushing John Mateer every play, pure pass rush every play, he had 2.5 sacks in like what felt like 2 drives once he gave up trying to stop the run. And Oklahoma never punished him for that. They never tried to run it past him or throw a screen behind him. When you let a stud pass rusher like that only worry about pass rushing, you really can lose yourself in letting them just destroy a game. It's the same thing. Like, I know a lot of people will watch NFL and they'll say, why is Micah Parsons not on the field on this play? He needs to be on the field every play. Well, it's because it's a run play. Teams they know, like, oh, I'd rather bring out this stud pass rusher and let him only pass rush. Because if I let him only worry about getting the quarterback, he's going to do that. But if he has to maybe freeze and stop a run, that's when you can kind of neutralize some of those game wreckers. And when you let a game wrecker be a game wrecker, when you let Colin Simmons only worry about pass rushing, he's going to game wreck you. And that's how you let one guy have 2.5 sacks in the blink of an eye. And then also just a final note I have for this game. I hope that you bet Texas defense to score a touchdown or Oklahoma to score a touchdown defensively. I put a little bit of money on each of them to have a defensive touchdown. Texas got one on the punt return, so that was a nice little hit there. It was not the first touchdown, though, unfortunately. Arch threw one before that, but it was the second and only non-offensive or not other touchdown in that game. So just a note, though.
Oklahoma would love to have had a touchdown in general.
They did not find the end zone.
That would have been nice. I don't think either team's out. I think both teams.
For sure.
I think what's key for Texas now is, are we looking at the progression of an offensive system full of new guys, and it just took some time to start gelling up with the offensive line, the run game, and Arch? Or was that just, this is our biggest rival, we're prepared like hell for this, and we're ready, and they might take a step back again in a week or two? So that's the biggest key for Texas. Biggest key for Oklahoma for me, this is the start of a gauntlet for Oklahoma. They have South Carolina next week, but then after that, let me just pull up their schedule. I'm bad podcasting, I know. But so they're 5-1 right now, 1-1 in the SEC. They go on the road to South Carolina next week. Then they finish the season 5 games, 5 ranked opponents. They got Ole Miss at home, Tennessee and Alabama on the road, Mizzou and LSU at home. If you go 3-2 against that schedule, I find that a success. Just because that's a hard schedule. Ole Miss, I understand that they barely beat Washington State yesterday, 24-21, but they can beat you. South Carolina, for what it's worth, they lost. They're not as good as we thought they would be. They can beat you, especially on the road. Tennessee and Alabama, we know how dangerous they are, and you're playing those two teams on the road. And Mizzou and LSU always have like a bone to pick with you, even though we don't believe in Brian Kelly a lot. So Oklahoma's got to get some things figured out, because this is a stretch that you can easily go 3-3 in and immediately vault yourself out of playoff discussion if you lose those games. All right. New thing on the show, cleanup crew. We want to not only talk about the top 2 or 3 games every week, we want to go through quickly and break down different things that happen throughout the weekend, whether it's games or storylines. Feel free to go as long or as short as you want. Let's start with USC. They controlled number 15 Michigan. They beat them 31-13. For me, this was like a avalanche game. It started out USC takes the lead, then near in the second half, Michigan eventually ties it up, and then everything that we said going into this week was this is a Lincoln Riley referendum game. This is Michigan. Michigan last year, without being able to throw the forward pass, was able to beat USC because USC is just not physical enough. Can they be physical enough to beat a Michigan team that can throw the forward pass? That was the question with them. And I can tell you confidently, USC finished that game three sacks, 5 tackles for loss, 2 pass deflections. They averaged 8.3 yards per pass, and King Miller 158 yards on the ground, 8.8 yards per rush, and a touchdown. Wayman Jordan had 3.5 yards per carry, averages the team 6.4 yards per carry, 2 touchdowns on the ground. They were the more physical team. Justice Haynes only finished with 51 rushing yards. There's 5 yards per carry. Bryce Underwood was pedestrian, but honestly decent. It just wasn't great. For me, if we're talking about this is the Lincoln Riley referendum game, and this is how, are they going to be physical? They passed that test, and they look scary in the Big Ten.
Yeah, they did something that no one has really done much in the last few years, and they bullied Michigan. They kind of Michigan. Jaden Mayava, I mean, we knew he was good. He was at advertised, 25 of 32, 270 in the air, a couple touchdowns. Mekhi Lemon, again, as advertised, 10 targets, 9 receptions, 93 yards, and a touchdown. He's a beast. Yeah, you said King Miller, Wayman Jordan, Brian Jackson. They had a slew of running backs, used them all well. They all played well. I think USC has a very high ceiling this year. They look good, eye test wise. They finally have the physicality that I think they've had the skill players and they've had the ability to make big plays, but they haven't had the physicality in the trenches either side of the ball in the last few years that have made them look like a huge difference maker. And then you have Eric Gentry, the 6'6" linebacker. He was all over the field. He led the team in tackles. They finally have the playmakers on the front seven defensively and on the offensive line to move people in the Big Ten. This is going to be a scary team that I think is going to have their way with a lot of Big Ten teams. You look forward at their schedule. They play at Notre Dame next week. That'll be a really fun game. Notre Dame had a slow first half in theirs, but they're obviously a good football team. USC, big rivalry too with those two. On the Michigan side, their ceiling is pretty obviously as much as Bryce Underwood can throw the ball. There were moments where Bryce Underwood was rolling out to his left and would sidearm around a defender and throw a beautiful 15-yard pass right into the chest of his wide receiver. You see him make a play like that, oh man, this guy's, all the potential in the world. But then one of his interceptions was, just pretty like a big overthrow. He missed a lot of open players in the flats, easy throw. He missed a lot of easy throws, but he's making a lot of the tough ones. That gives you hope for him down the line, for his potential in his future. But in terms of winning right now, you need him to make those plays, and he just wasn't. And then USC did the game plan that I think a lot of teams need to put up more against Michigan, and that is go all in on stopping the run. Just every single player on defense, we're going to go one-on-one on the outside, and then we're going to put 8 guys in the box, and we're going to stop the run and force Michigan to throw. USC did that, and I just think Michigan didn't have what it takes in that game to win with their arms. And it happened. Bryce was 15 of 24, did have 207, but there was a couple long plays in there that aided that yardage there.
Right.
If you're Michigan, you need to get the run game going again, and you need to be more of a threat in the air. And if you're USC, you looked really well-rounded. You just got to keep this up.
Right, real quick, USC for the rest of the year has Notre Dame and Oregon on the schedule. You kind of prove that you can go up against a physical team. You are a legit Big Ten championship contender now and a legit playoff contender now, based off of how that game was. Michigan, honestly, that was a tale of two halves. Not game-wise, but if they won that game, you would be talking to them like, man, they're ahead of schedule with Bryce. He's true freshman. They don't have any receivers. They can go off and win the Big Ten or get close to winning the Big Ten because after this, they have Washington and Ohio State is their hardest games left on the schedule. Ohio State, you can go and afford that loss, but now you already have a Big Ten loss. If you lose to Washington too, you're probably out of it, and you're looking to build for next year. But if you won that game, you could be like, all right, we can lose 2 games and somehow still compete for a playoff spot, and we're ahead of schedule. So that's the tough pill to swallow for Michigan. Really exciting if you're a USC fan. Let's get to the next game. Colorado takes down number 22 Iowa State, 24-17. I got a text from one of my buddies. He's a Colorado alum, and he said that was the biggest win of the Prime era. And I mean, I don't know if that's necessarily true, but at the same time, do you have any major takeaways here? I'm surprised of how clean of a game Colorado played. If you told me one of those teams was going to play a clean game and one of them wasn't, I would obviously pick Iowa State to play the clean game.
Yeah, I was talking with Logan, my Iowa State. I don't have a state guy on the other end of it, and his words were,
source.
Yep, his words were he was just embarrassed. He said that he's like, our coaching staff didn't show up, our players didn't show up. We looked like we thought we were going to win that game with ease. We just didn't have a good game plan. We didn't adjust, and our players just looked like they were getting outfought. Rocco Becht was rather inaccurate in this game, 18 of 33, but also only averaging 6 yards per pass. Not completing a lot of passes, and they also weren't really going downfield, which is kind of a concern. No touchdowns in the air and threw a pick. He did have 7 carries for 31 yards, but that's also the team's second leading rusher. I don't know. I didn't get to see too much of this game, so I don't want to give too much of an analysis other than it sounds like Colorado played really well, and it sounds like Iowa State didn't take it seriously. Colorado did. Sounds familiar. Colorado came out on top. They're 3-4 now. That kind of helps them with their bowl game life. If you're Iowa State, you fall to 5-2. You're also probably on the outside looking in with the Big 12 championship. And in terms of a playoff, I think you'd have to be perfect if that would be enough, depending on what your resume would end up being.
I mean, in the Big 12 right now, Texas Tech and BYU have that. They're Texas Tech and BYU and Cincinnati are the favorites to make the Big 12 title game. They're still undefeated in the conference. Utah and ASU each have a loss. Houston has a loss. Iowa State now has 2, which makes it hard. That's why they're on the outside looking in. They not only need to take care of business for the rest of the year, but they need some things to go their way against the other teams. Yeah, that was a surprising game for me. It wasn't like surprising in terms of Penn State losing to UCLA, but it was surprising like, I'm sorry, Logan, but congrats, Scott. The second Scott reference of the show. Let's go to the third game. Georgia defeats Auburn 20-10. Now, this has a lot of controversy involved in it. Before we get to the controversial play, did you see Kirby Smart lie about calling a timeout?
Yeah, is that how they got their 4th timeout? They're like hidden. I saw that on Twitter today.
So the game clock was going down to 0. So instead of taking a delay of game, the refs called a timeout, and Kirby's like going up to them, clapping his hands, saying, "I was clapping. I was trying to get them to snap the ball. I wasn't calling a timeout." So the refs were like, "Oh, okay." So they asked for the game clock operator to reset the game clock, and the timeout was given back to Georgia. And then you see in the replay, Kirby's hand, if you're watching on YouTube, is literally going like this. He's calling time. He's not clapping. So Kirby just avoided a delay game for free by doing that. That had to piss off Auburn fans. The main thing that everyone keeps talking about is Auburn was up 10-0. Jackson Arnold is carrying the ball in the red zone. He crosses the plane, or it looks like, for a touchdown to make it 16-0.
He scored a touchdown.
17. Yeah,
objectively.
And then he let go, like he fumbled the ball. Ironically, at the same time, Kyron Jones, a UGA defensive back, he picks it up, runs it back. Refs blow the ball dead. So then the whole officiating there was wrong. First of all, if you're telling me that was a fumble, and Sean McDonough, the broadcaster for the game, was saying, if you're telling me that was a fumble, then that's a live ball. That should be a Georgia touchdown.
Yeah.
Like that right there, he just returned it to his own end zone off a fumble. That's a live ball. That should be a touchdown. That shouldn't be a touchback or Georgia just recovering the fumble. Now, biggest point was Georgia. I mean, that they went to replay, and it was ruled a fumble. Like, it was not ruled a touchdown, even though the ball crossed the plane and it should have been a touchdown. That should have made it 16-0 Auburn. Not saying that Auburn would have won the game because they didn't score. Like, Georgia ended up with more than 17 points, but that would have been a big difference. That's where the game changed for me.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That nothing deflates your sails. Should go like thinking you're up 17-0, and then all of a sudden have that ripped out on a terrible call. Plus, I mean that changes a lot of how you play in the second half. Once Auburn got down, they don't get down. Like they got down, they got tied in the third, and then they were down in the fourth. That changes how you have to play that game when that kind of thing happens. And it was just bad. And there's two possible. This is the kind of reffing that I think like there's refs that will make a wrong call, and it's like, okay, that's objectively wrong. That sucks, but you got to move forward. This was additionally extra bad in the sense that there were two possible outcomes: either Georgia touchdown because it was a live ball, or an Auburn touchdown. There's no in between that could have happened, and somehow we got the in between, where it's just Georgia ball, but no touchdown.
And both fan bases were pissed.
Yeah.
But one fan base was like, it should have been a touchdown on my end. The other fan base was like, if you're going to call it fumble, then that should have been a touchdown on my end.
Yeah, so they got the call wrong. It was definitely an Auburn touchdown. The football is in his possession in the end zone, so I don't know how it's a fumble. But they got it wrong. But then they got it wrong again by not giving Georgia the touchdown. That's the kind of reffing, in addition to giving Georgia 4 timeouts, that needs to, like, I don't know if the investigated is the right word, but like that's where there needs to be repercussions for just being like that bad at reffing. Like even like if you and I were reffing that game, at least we would have gotten the call right in both fashions, and I wouldn't have given Georgia a 4th timeout. But yeah, if you're an Auburn fan, you have every right to be really frustrated. And if you're a Georgia fan, count your lucky stars. Send a prayer up for getting that gift of a game that moves Georgia to 5-1, and I think that truly potentially saves. They have to go play Ole Miss. They play Texas. They play at Florida, and they play at Georgia Tech at the end of the year. If they lose that game and have 2 losses going into that schedule, and they lose one more, they're done for the playoffs. Huge shout out to the refs if you're a Georgia fan. They might have saved you a chance at the playoff this year. And if you're Auburn, that's really frustrating. Unfortunately, that moves you to 3-3. I'm sure Hugh Freeze is. If there's anybody that probably loses the most on that, it's Hugh Freeze. And then I also see a world like Auburn's offense isn't moving the football. I can't imagine someone like Cam Coleman is willing to stick out whatever's going to happen next. There's a chance where Cam Coleman and Nick Marsh are both in the transfer portal this offseason. If you need a wide receiver, call your head coach. If you have money to give to your NIL funds, figure it out. I'm going to do what I can. Dan Lanning, can we get Cam Coleman or Nick Marsh out here, or both, please? We'll see what goes on there. But there's a world where those two guys are on the transfer.
Yeah, that was a ridiculous game. And Georgia eventually, they off the fumble, they drove down the field, they kicked the field goal, made it 10-3, and then they scored 17 unanswered points. They win the game 20-10. But that was a ridiculous series of events. And you got to feel for Hugh Freeze and Auburn. They're trying to squeak out a win and try to save Hugh Freeze's job, but didn't work there. All right, next game, Northwestern stuns Penn State 22-21. Drew Aller, obviously the biggest story is not just the loss. Drew Aller's out for the year, unfortunately ending his college career. Obviously, we can make a lot of jokes about Drew Aller, the player, but the guy had a chance to go to the draft last year, be a top 3-round pick, make a lot of money, and decided to come back for his guys. It not only, despite the injury, it broke with how they decided to, with their offensive game plans. Like everything just seemed broken, but also after the injury, like now he's looking at probably going undrafted next year, maybe late round pick. His college career is over. He has no ability to revive any hype for him coming out of college. You just got to feel for a guy like that, the player. James Franklin, post-game press conference. I was reading from a lot of Penn State beat writers. That was like the shortest opening statement he ever had. They all look defeated. He at one point, not Penn State. James Franklin was even asked, "Do you want to be the head coach of Penn State?" And so it felt like the reporter who tweeted out said they said he was non-committal, and to me that just, I don't think it was non-committal. He basically said, "For me, it's all about the players," and he said the right stuff, but it was just, you're coming off of 3 straight losses. That was Penn State's the first FBS team since 1978 to lose back-to-back games as a 20-plus point favorite. James Franklin after the game said, "It's 100% on me. We need to get it fixed, and I will get it fixed." Will they get it fixed?
No, I don't think so.
Is this the end for James
Yeah.
Franklin?
Oh, yeah. This is definitely the. I don't know if this means he gets fired like this week per se, but I think this is the like. There's no way they might let him finish the season, just like get to National Signing Day, get the recruits to sign the paper, and then kick him out, something like that. But this is the end of him. Like this is his last season, whether he makes it to the end or not. But this is the end of him. Drew Aller, feel for him. He looks terrible even before the injury. Nick Singleton has also tanked his draft stock. He's lucky he's on the same team as Drew Aller because he has not been talked about enough, but he's been awful. He looks slow. He doesn't look quick. He's tanked his draft stock. I don't know what's going on with Penn State. I don't think this gets it fixed. They're 3-3 now, and their players look like they've quit on the team. The coaching looks like they've quit on the team. This is 3 straight weeks of being outcoached, 3 straight weeks of being outplayed and out hustled. They go to at Iowa, which not that Iowa's anything amazing, but given what Penn State's lost recently, I that's very much a losable game. I don't see them moving the ball much,
especially without their quarterback.
Yeah, and then you go at Ohio State, they're going to get smoked in that game. And then you play Indiana, who we just saw as the real deal. And if Indiana keeps playing focused football, I don't see them winning that game either. They finish off at Michigan State, Nebraska, at Rutgers. So sure, you could get 6 wins, but it's going to have to be from those. You're going to have to go 3-0 in those 3 games. And as much as I want to say that they should, considering they just lost to Northwestern at home after getting blowing it to UCLA, I don't know if they even make a bowl game this year. We've definitely seen the end of the James Franklin era.
I just realized, like, as you were talking, they are teetering on the edge of bowl eligibility. And this was, look, going into after the Oregon game and even after the UCLA game, I did not think it was the end for James Franklin. The Oregon game, you lost to a top 10 team. It was embarrassing the way, like, you were coming off a bye. They were traveling cross country. It was your whiteout, all that good stuff. That's all fair. But you lost the game in typical James Franklin fashion. I was like, okay, that's not enough for them to cough up $56 million to fire the guy. You lose to UCLA, I'm like, okay, it's getting hotter now. I still don't think it's enough for them to do it, but it's certainly more of a possibility now. Now you're back at home against Northwestern, a team that, like, David Braun's a good coach, and they overall are a very strong-willed team. But they shouldn't be in the game with you if you are Penn State. You should crush them. So, like, when I'm just trying to pull up the score and all that stuff. For me, I'm the last person to quote unquote fire a guy. Might just be like they technically have to fire him, but it might just be both sides want to part ways at the end of the year. Something's broken and something's soured there. It is not. It doesn't even look like obviously losing's not fun, but it doesn't even look like anyone's enjoying their time at Penn State. Not like James Franklin looks miserable. Like it just feels like they technically would have to fire him, but you got, like you said, going down the schedule, Iowa's probably going to beat them next week at home for Iowa. They don't. Penn State doesn't have their starting quarterback. Watch Penn State's backup quarterback come in, and now their offense looks like how it's supposed to, and they go on a tear. But they have Iowa, Ohio State, Indiana. There's a chance you go 0-3 in that stretch. So right now they're already 0-3 in the conference. They're 3-3 overall. If they're fighting, if I gave you, hey, here's $20, place it on one team that's gonna miss a bowl game, you wouldn't put anything down on Penn State, because we said it. This is Penn State's ceiling definer, and this is Penn State's sirens. And this is also sorry. The main point I'm trying to make here, but I'm rambling, is this is not just Penn State's ceiling definer. This is James Franklin's best team, and they are now in danger of missing a bowl game. That's the scary part, and that's the reason now I'm looking at this saying, I was never quick to fire a guy or say someone should be fired, but man, this might be a parting of ways, a mutual parting of ways.
I think that's what's going to be, because every player on that team, and I don't blame them, they're all high recruits. They're all talented players. I guarantee you the half draft eligible are trying to figure out, what do I need to do now to get myself as high up in the draft as possible? Thinking about, and like, obviously some of that is executing and being a good teammate, but there's a lot of that too, where I think players are going to get a little selfish in how they play. I don't know if guy's going to put his life on the line, look at Drew Aller and think, oh yeah, now's my chance to make a play for my team to win this game to go to the playoff, I don't think people are going to be willing to make that play and sacrifice their NFL draft stock. And then for the guys that are the draft's not so much in question, whether it's eligibility or talent, they're probably looking around the country thinking, where can I go? They're probably starting to try to feel out spots that are going to be opened up and where they need to end up in the portal. It looks like everyone in this program is figured out where they're moving on. And this bad stretch by James Franklin, we'll see how much it continues. This is the difference between if they leave this season, if he figures it out, he could still get a job. Let's say Jed Fish leaves as the Washington job, or UCLA is like, hey, we want a head coach. He could have gotten maybe a more high profile job, but if they fall and they don't make a bowl game, he's gonna have to like go begging Michigan State to take him. Like that's the difference of figuring this out and then setting yourself up for your next spot. And if you don't figure this out, like you're going to be begging for a job or you're going to have to start pretty low again and work your way up. So it'll be very interesting to see how James Franklin can navigate this and get his players to buy back in, because that'll completely change probably the job that he goes with next.
For me, I completely agree. For me, it's not that they're losing or he's coaching poorly or they're playing poorly. They look miserable. Something has soured there. And I don't know exactly what it is. But maybe it was just like you have all this pressure to fulfill on your expectations and you have crumbled and that's what's soured. I don't know. But at the same time, it's not going well. And I don't know how long he's going to be there after this season. Speaking of firing, last cleanup crew, Oregon State's fired Trent Bray. This just came out right before we started recording. Trent Bray, former All Pac-12 player for the Beavers, kind of got the job at a really rough spot. Jonathan Smith leaves right after Oregon State loses to Oregon in their final Pac-12 matchup against each other. Jonathan Smith takes the Michigan State job. Oregon State goes from within. They get kicked out. Every team in their conference, as we know, left them. Oregon State, the 3 years prior to him being hired under Jonathan Smith, made bowl games. They were really building up. Bray's 0-7 this year, and he finishes 5-14 overall. They have to pay him $4 million in buyout money. This is the worst start for Oregon State since 1991 when they started out 0-10, and they likely will get to that point. They've just looked really, really bad. Trent Bray is probably just one of those guys that like was never meant to be a head coach, but he had to step up for his alma mater when no one was interested in that job. And when Jonathan Smith left, I think it is kind of poetic. The coach that essentially got him fired was Jake Dickert at Wake Forest, because Jake Dickert was the other coach of the other team that was left behind at Washington State. Jake Dickert just put up some good seasons at Washington State, and he earned a job offer to leave the quote unquote Pac-2. Oregon State goes to play Wake Forest. Wake Forest destroys them 39-14. Oregon State's 0-7. I don't feel for him in terms of like he's get paid handsomely for having had that job and being now buyout and everything. Mm-hmm. But this is alma mater, and he was kind of in a no-win situation to begin with.
Yeah, I feel bad for him that it's his alma mater. Like, this is where he went to school. This is where he's coached for most of his, D1 collegiate career, starting like linebackers coach and then working his way up. But yeah, he's going to get paid handsomely. And I think when he took the job, it was after they knew they were going to be left behind in conference realignment. It was after they knew the way things were shaking up in the rest of the college landscape and that they were going to be at the bottom. I don't think he took this job like knowing that or thinking that, oh, I'm in this great situation, I'm going to build this program, and then he got screwed over. He took this job after Oregon State had kind of been screwed over. So I think there's had to been some understanding if you're him, like this is going to be an uphill battle, this is going to be a challenge. And unfortunately, not all due to Bray, but they haven't recruited well whatsoever. He has not really gotten any NIL funding whatsoever. They're going to be in the Pac-12, which is going to be basically a glorified group of six kind of school. Yeah, it's like Texas State's in there. They're in a whole nother spot, unfortunately, than they were 5 years ago. You feel for the program more so than Trent Bray. I would love to get fired and get paid $4 million for that. That would be fantastic. But I feel more so for the school and just the situation. You feel bad to see like a cool rivalry with Oregon State, a team that was ranked for the last handful of years under Jonathan Smith before conference realignment just fall off and just seem to have no real future. It's just it's pretty sad.
It's one of those situations where Trent Bray wasn't set up to succeed. I think without boring the audience, if you know, like I've somewhat followed along the NIL behind the scenes drama that's going on at Oregon State. They don't have any structure. A lot of this 0-7, I know it's going to go under Trent Bray's record. It should be under their athletic director, Scott Barnes. They don't have a system set up. And credit to Washington State, they obviously were pissed that the other schools left them, but they also understood their role, and they were like, okay, how do we get better from here? Oregon State keeps trying to play the imposter syndrome of, no, we're just as good as the other schools. And it's left them out in the dust. Like, they are not good, and they are not a good program, and they are not a good athletic department anymore. A lot of it falls on their athletic director, and it's a tough situation for everyone involved. I understand they're not in a legit conference anymore. They don't have legit money coming in, but there has to be a better effort than what they have going on right now. Yeah. What's next for Oregon State? I see you wrote that down.
No idea.
No clue. It might be a Dan Mullen-esque guy, like a former successful coach who got fired at his spot, now wants to get back into coaching.
James Franklin?
James Franklin. The problem is, like, Dan Mullen took over for a good UNLV team. Whoever takes the Oregon State job will have to rebuild the program. And not rebuild the team, rebuild the programs. Yeah. It might be like what I think this is Rogers guy that's at Washington State. Like, you might have to go the South Dakota State head coach route.
I think that's what I would do. I would take the young hotshot D2 FCS coach and take a fly. Like, you have nothing. You're 0-7. You have nothing to lose. I say you take the fly. Like, instead of going with a coach where you know you're going to get mediocrity out of, or you know that you're going to be fine with, I would rather just take a flyer on a young hotshot in a lower level, and if it doesn't work out, fine, figure it out again, buy yourself some years. If it does work out and that guy ends up being a stud, then you can really accelerate your program. That's what I would do if I were them.
It's the same argument that we make a lot when people talk about how coaching, like, you don't want to hire a certain coach because he might leave. My argument every time there is, if someone's going to Oregon State and getting a job elsewhere, then that means he elevated your program. Now you can go hire an even better coach. So what did Washington State do when Jake Dickert left? They didn't hire Jake Dickert from Alabama. They hired him from, like, UW Madison D2. You know what I mean? It's like, he came in, he was the defensive coordinator, became their head coach, really built a good program, and he got the Wake Forest P4 head coaching job. So then you go out and you hire Jimmy Rogers. I wouldn't be shocked if Washington State loses Jimmy Rogers in a few years. But that is the progression of a program and to keep you relevant. So feel bad for Trent Bray. Not really, though. They got to go make a good hire here. And if the guy, you better not be scared of him leaving you. You just have to accept that just means he's elevating your program.
Yeah, it's the reality of what you are.
Yeah. There's a lot going on in Chicago right now behind you. All that said, this was a first of its kind show for Jason and I. We had to wear some egg on our face today because we were both very wrong about one of the games, the one that was close to our hearts. But I'm very proud of you, Jace, for not calling in sick and avoiding the show. We have to be, as I said on Wednesday, we have to be the truth tellers about college football to the country, even if it hurts us. So it just got really dark in my living room. So I'm glad I got a light in front of me. But yeah, that was a first of a kind of show, Jace. How are we feeling?
I feel good. Yesterday was my sadness of the loss. Today I've moved beyond it. Still games to be played.
Hell yeah. It's like, that wasn't the last game of the year. None of these, if your team's losing right now, unless you're Penn State, that was just week 7. We got plenty of college football to go. Jason and I will be right here. Make sure you're following us on TikTok at flag4 discussion, on Twitter at F4 discussion, and then YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts spelled out, flag for discussion. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you're following us. Make sure you ring that bell. Make sure you go steal your mom's phone. Subscribe to us. All she gets is an email. Like, that's all, but it helps us, and we would really appreciate that. Jace, you got anything else?
No, go Lions, please tonight. How about that?
We need Jace to get a winner today. Jace desperately needs it for his mental health. So everyone reach out to Jace. Make sure he's doing okay. Check on your people, you know. With that said, this is going off the rails. From myself, Farbod Merkazi, my lovely partner, Jace Hatfield, we will be back on Thursday for our Week 8 preview. Plenty to talk about. Thanks for tuning in. This has been Flag for Discussion.